Good morning, everybody. Good evening for those from Australia and other countries. Thank you for joining us today. It is 9 o'clock right now here in France. We'll be giving some more time for other attendants to join. We'll start in a few minutes. Thank you for your patience. We'll be giving some more minutes for the late people to join. Thank you. All right, so I think we are now stabilizing in terms of attendance number. Good morning, good evening, everybody. Good afternoon, maybe, most likely. Welcome to this new webinar. I'm Sebastien Gailleton, Head of Products and Support at StormAudio. Today's subject is about active room treatment. Very interesting room calibration upgrade to the Dirac Live tool that was launched, that we started to work on more than 7 months ago. We've been through different demos, beta programs, and it is now time to go into some more details to provide you some tips. So what we'll cover today, first of all, since we are open to a broader audience than just StormAudio user, I will first go through a little bit of what StormAudio company is and our product range. Then a quick recap on the active room treatment, the principles, and what is the most important part of today's webinar. We'll be looking at standard calibration, I would say, and then give some tips for some use cases, some very specific use cases where you need to adjust the parameters in different ways. So once again, thank you for participating. It's always a pleasure to hold a webinar with you. As you could see, you have a question box, and you can raise your questions at any time. I may not answer them during the presentation, but I will make sure that I answer all the questions at the very end. Also, be informed that tomorrow, a day after the webinar, you should receive an email where you will have a link to the recording of that session. And right now, you already have in the panel, you should have somewhere a possibility to download the presentation as a PDF file. So you have everything you need to start playing with the tool after the webinar. So let's kick it off. I think once again we stabilized. Thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure. So first thing about StormAudio, definitely focusing on immersive sound reproduction, and we do offer equipments to make some of the best sound reproduction you can have in any room. The company started in 2010. We are now about 20 persons worldwide, with 16 persons here in Nantes, in France, the headquarters. The main office is mainly driven by R&D. We have 70% of our team being the developers, engineers in all the different domains, whether it is electronics, software, hardware, mechanics. We do have two other offices with one subsidiary in the US that takes care of distribution, sales, and support. And in Hong Kong, we have someone taking care of mainly the Asian markets and Australia markets, doing also sales and support. The complete development is done in-house, whether it is firmware or hardware, and we do have expertise, including in the very hot topic of digital signal processing that has been key to manage this integration of active room treatments. The products are made in France, and we are quite proud of that. We do want to make sure that we have full quality control and use all the expertise that we have here in Europe and especially in France. The company is built around 4 pillars that we would call the DNAs. When we started the company, we wanted to bring tools to the integrators, and in a way that integrators could make a product that fits the exact need of the installation. So the platform has been built around upgradability and modularity. You buy a product, it is future-proof, whether this is through firmware upgrades or addition or swap of the options that you can install in the product. In this way, you can go into many different setups, whether you want to go digital, analog, etc. So you upgrade when you need it, and in the end, you just pay for what you need when you build your installation. For your end customer, it is a sustainable investment, and it can make sure that when you invest in a StormAudio product, is not looking at 2-3 years like a lot of different processors in this industry. No, you're looking for like a decade of use without any issue and with something that can keep upgraded. So that's the main pillar about upgradability and modularity. The second step, the second pillar that we had in mind was that we could see a lot of products that were quite complicated to configure. Well, it was to us very critical and important that the configuration process has to be really fluent. So we designed the whole product around the web UI interface, so web user interface that really provides step-by-step configuration. Even recently, we pushed even further that ease of use by using a StormAudio that is a very high-level configuration system that I really advise you to play with. And then that's really key, and this is the feedback we get. And this is not only within what we've done in our product, but this is also by the partnership we have with Dirac that has very well integrated tool that helps you make the room calibration in the best conditions without having to be an expert. Although, and you will see that, active room treatment has changed a little bit the game by adding more parameters that require you to know what you are doing. The third pillar is about optimal performance. Sound reproduction is about a complete system. And at StormAudio, we wanted to make sure that we do understand all the parameters of sound reproduction and make sure that whatever we do in the products and the hardware is necessary to get the right performance. So this is really key. And the optimal performance is about a musical performance, transparency, dynamic neutrality. So all of those things that you can name when you listen to a system is what we were focusing on when we designed the product. And that is all along the product life. Customer having the MK1 could upgrade with our new DAC board that we designed for the MK2 to bring up the performance. So all of that, it's the DNA. And the final pillar is also really key. When you're an installer, you have your customer, you want to make sure that you can help them at any time and that it is easy to do. So we have a complete portfolio of support tools, whether this comes from the ticketing systems to the knowledge base that you can access on our web US, on your website, sorry. You always find a way to get support and really in a timely manner. So we have people worldwide right now, so you can make sure that you have a full coverage 24 hours a day. So that's key. These are the 4 pillars of the brand, and this is what I've built the reputation of StormAudio so far. So we have built a product range around 3 categories. We have processors. Right now, we have 3 different models. One is the ASP Elite, and this is our flagship model. It is the Swiss Army knife product that you can configure the way you want by the use of different modules, different options. It can cover, through a complete modular approach, systems from 16 channels up to 32 channels. both in digital and analog. So you choose what you want and you build what you need. So that's really key. Now, this has a price, this modularity. So we decided that it should come together with a product that is more an entry-level processor in this high-end market, and this is the ISP Core. It is a 16-channel analog-only platform that can still be upgraded with the HDMI board, and this brings the exact same performance and features as the ISP Elite, apart from some features that are optional through a license that you can buy. But overall, this is the same performance and same sound quality. So this is the ISP Core. And the third product that we launched earlier this year, it's the ISP Evo. And this one is a pure digital processor, meaning that you can go into systems where you actually do not need analog cables anymore. You drive everything in digital, whether this is the point-to-point with the AES EBU link, you can have 16 in, 32 out, or you take the audio over IP, and in that case, you can have 32 inputs up to 32 outputs. So we have different models from 20 channels to 32 channels. With this, you can go into a lot of different new markets, whether this is integrating DCI systems at home, or whether this is to put our product into mastering studios where you want to do post-mixing verifications, I mean monitoring and all that, that you can do with the ISP Evo. So 3 different processes in the line. Now, we also have a receiver. That's something that we will restart shipping in September time. So this is called the ISR Fusion. It is a very interesting piece because it brings 20 channels processing with 16 channel amplifications up to 150 watts. You can also bridge and reach 500 watts per channels. So with that, you can build system like 9.4.6 or 9.4.4 if you bridge the LCR, for example. So really a top level receiver that helps you make systems with a product that costs less than 20,000 euros with the complete feature set that StormAudio offers that you already know, I believe. Those processors and receivers are built around a single platform that is well known right now in the market for its performance, its upgradability, and its ease of use. HDMI board is upgradable in all these different products, and we do offer the extensive control systems for all of them, whether from Control 4 to QCs and all that. So for integrators, this is very nice to integrate that. The final category is the amplifiers. It goes together with the processors. We have 2 models, an 8-channel and a 16-channel. They share the same Class D technology with 200 watts, 8 ohms, or 400 watts, 4 ohms. And you can bridge both models and you get up to 800 watts. The main difference is that with the PA8 Ultra, you can actually have a complete all-channel driven performance because we have enough power supply capability. While with the PA16, if you start bridging and use all the other channels, you may end up with some, let's say, current limits with very demanding speakers. But that's about it. And total, this is up to 3,000 watts power supply that you have. So this is a lot of capabilities for any system. Something very important to notice with the COVID, the last 2 years have been very difficult to manage the stock due to component supply, etc. We're very happy that this is now over. We have stock on all the models, so you can place your order and you will be delivered very fast. The only product that will ship only in September, this is the new model ISR Fusion, our new receiver. You can already place order. But clearly, right now, if you have a project, just call us and you can have products in a few weeks. And that's really in 2 weeks, let's say. And that's really key. So we're looking for you on that aspect. So this was about the product line. In terms of cosmetics, for those who do not know the products, you can see on the left the ISP Elite front panel and the power amplifiers in the bottom with their back panels. And on the right, the other models being the ISP Core 16 and the ISP Evo sharing the same front panel design. So our products, they always fit your systems as I described. So whether you go for an analog system, like the traditional way to drive your speakers and amplifiers, or you want to go into a more, not complicated, but a more advanced system where you need a DCI interface, well, you will find the right products partner in our portfolio. And you name it, you have all the different options, whether you use active speakers that require digital interface, maybe some type of multi-way active filterings, digital processors like the Meridian that we can interface directly, or digital amplifiers I mean, brands like Wisdom or L-Acoustics. They have their own systems with their own speakers calibrations. Well, you can interface very easily with our products, and this is key. If you work with StormAudio, you can be sure that you will always find the right products in the portfolio. A product in an home cinema or in any listening room will be nothing if you're not able to provide the best calibration. So meaning make sure that the whole system works fine. So all the product, being the receivers and the processor, they share the same platform as I mentioned, up to 32 channel post-processing. You can manage an unlimited number of subwoofers. So this is really about your imagination and your capability in the room in the limit of 32 channels. And for every system, you can go with multi-way speakers, but you can also, and this is a very interesting feature, you can reconfigure your 32 channels the way you want freely, up to 6 different layouts. So you can create different listening experience or usage of the room with the ISP. On top of that, you can decide to go for a complete manual calibration, and we do provide all the different tools, whether this comes from the bass management with a standard or an expert with the flexible bass routing. You can do whatever you want with the bass management, using external systems like the Room EQ Wizard plugin, and make your all measurements and EQ parameters in the tool. Then you can import that in the system. So this is for the expert calibrators who are used to make everything manually, doing themselves the measurements, doing then EQ and verifications, and at the end they load filters into the processors. But for most of our customers, installers, they prefer using the Dirac Live because the tool is really nice and easy to use and provides really good performance. So we do offer now the 3 grades with room corrections, bass control, and active room treatment, and this is included by default with all StormAudio processors. The only thing is with the active room treatment products that were before 2023, I mean January 1st, 2023, they would have to buy the license, but the other things are all by default. Talking about active room treatment, you've got, and I hope that you have been able to watch the previous webinars where we did provide a complete descriptions of the principles of active room treatment against the other systems that they provide, whether the bass control or the room correction. With the active room treatment, we go into a very different world of calibration. So this animation will explain you what exactly happens. As you can see, you have the direct sounds. You also get some reflected sound, and this can get create disturbances when at your ear level. So by using the active room treatment, you can get this corrected. And the way it works is that in any room, as soon as you put the speaker in the room, you get the reflections of the walls. Obviously, a sound wave is not a laser beam, right? But right now, this is just for pure illustration. But at least you can understand that in any reproduction, you have the direct sound, which is the useful sound that you want to hear, and you expect to only hear this one. But as soon as you go into a room, well, the walls will participate into it, due to the room modes of the room. So that's really based on the physical dimensions of the room, the nature of the walls that will create more or less reflections, and in the end, these reflections are combined with the direct sound and creates really, let's say, a denatured sound with a sound stage that is not good, a bass response that is completely wrong, with boomy or sometimes completely uneven in the room. So these are problems that you face in the room. With the active room treatment, what you could see is that it becomes completely active. So now we are using the speakers. So you have, to describe it, and this is very important that you consider that, you have what we call the main speaker. This is the speaker that has the direct sound that you want to play. So this is the expected signal, right? So the direct signal, it is played in the main speaker. And then you have the other speakers that can become support speaker to that main speaker. So what happens is that as soon as you play something on your main speaker, you get some reflections and all that. The idea of ART is that we use the other speakers to compensate for this reflection. In this way, we can compensate for the reflections even before they get created, because we have analyzed the room, we measured the room, we created filters for these support speakers, and we can make sure that they play at the same time as the main speaker, this counter signal that help reduce the issues that you get in your listening area, being the effect of the reverberation, so you control the decay time. You also improve a lot the seat-to-seat variation. So all of that is what participate to make the active room treatment an excellent tool to control your system. What you need to keep in mind about active room treatment, it is not taking care of the full frequency bandwidth, and you don't want to go into equalizing a full bandwidth system. The results are usually not the best. What you need to understand is that passive treatment are what is the most efficient, on the range above 150 Hz. You can easily use different absorbers and diffuser panels here and there in the room, placed in the right positions to get a good control of the decay time, in the reverberation time and all that in your room. When it becomes difficult, this is under 150 Hz, and this is where the active room treatment is focusing its analysis and processing. So that's really key to remember, that active room treatment does not replace or does not tell you that, oh, I don't have to treat my room. Well, we've been through demos where there was absolutely no treatment and this was working pretty well, but it's not something you want to do. You want to make sure that you have control over 150 Hz, and that comes with the passive room treatment. So what active room treatment does, and as we illustrated, is that you can use all your speakers to participate to the active room treatment. So if you have already a system in place, you don't change it. You just use active room treatment, and it will make sure that all the speakers in the room and your subwoofers are used to actively compensate for the problems that the room creates. In a way, the systems is very different in terms of how you should consider it. It's not as the traditional base management. You do not have a specific crossover to adjust for a given subwoofer, etc. No. What you look at is you look at capabilities. You have a certain amount of speakers, you have a certain amount of subwoofers. You will describe what they're capable of in terms of frequency response, and you will leave the system do the job into measuring the rooms, understanding where the problems are, and use the different speakers to compensate for those problems. The magic of that is that it does not require subwoofer to work. As long as you have speakers that can provide low frequencies, you don't need a subwoofer. Of course, if you want to have the real LFE effect and all that, you need to make sure that somewhere in the system you have ways to reproduce frequencies down to 20 Hz and even below. So sometimes subwoofers are required for that, but we know a good number of speakers in the world, I mean in the market, that can go down to 20 Hz. So that's really interesting thing about active room treatment. Active room treatment, as any other Dirac Live system, is focusing on improving the impulse response. Instead of doing this only on a one speaker base, what it does is that it uses all the other speakers of the room and make sure that for the signal that we are focusing on, so the main speaker will look at, the impulse response is really the best possible. And as a way of consequence, it helps have a better control of the decay time in the room. And consequence in terms of what you should listen is that all of a sudden you get the sound as it should be, meaning it's not denatured by the room, and it reduces the resonances. You will experience that in your listening space. You do not have a variation in the bass reproduction. It actually even go wider than the listening area. This is quite amazing how controlled this is. And this without the need of bulky passive treatment. I mean, you don't have to build a 1.5 meters or complicated Helmholtz resonators, etc. in your room. No, because below 150 Hz, the active room treatment tool will do the job for you. So that's really what is key. And what you can see illustrated in the presentation here is that clearly when ART is off, you can visualize the different effect of the room. So those are clearly room modes. The bass take a lot of time to decay, so the lingering bass, and this is completely masking the articulation of what you have in the low frequencies. And this is the main issue you get with low frequency reproduction, is that you might not get the articulation because it's too slow to decay. So it gets a complete masking. Active room treatment is doing a complete cleaning on the response of the low frequencies below 150 Hertz. So all of a sudden, what you will realize is that your bass are completely controlled, extremely tight, and this helps to have the full articulation of the low frequencies. And by doing so, it also opens up completely the other frequencies. You will see your sound stage is becoming really more stable, taking care with extremely nice the high bass, as we would call, or the low medium, will become really more clean and more articulating. And that is really critical when we talk about dialogue in a movie, for example. So that's what you can experience with the active room treatments. In the end, you can do a lot with not much, and it translates into being extremely efficient already when you play with just 2 speakers in a stereo system. And this is very nice because StormAudio, the products we offer, they are not only capable to drive your theater, but you can also use them to create multi-room environment with additional stereo zones. All your zones can be also calibrated with the Dirac Live ART. And honestly, what we've been experiencing is amazing. So that's great. Now, you can do things without subwoofer, but obviously, if you have the luxury to install more subwoofer, you can create a much more controlled and even experience in the low frequency and extend that to the infra bass if your subwoofers are capable. So that's the beauty of it. The active room treatment brings you a lot of different ways and open up in the let's say the different type of rooms that you can have. So far, bass control, for example, was limited with the use of speakers that you filter above a certain frequency and use of the subwoofers, right? That's typical of cinema, but now you see more and more lifestyle room where you can have floor standing speakers that can go very low in frequencies. Well, active room treatment now helps you make the best out of any speaker and use them down to their lowest frequency capability. So that's what is great. Active room treatment was launched on June 12th. So far, we've got exceptional feedback. We're very happy. This was actually without surprise. We've been through a long beta test program with our key partners, and although we could get also a lot of feedback about, oh, that could be improved, or that does this, what should I do, etc. In the end, whenever the tool is used correctly, all the results were very, very positive. So the reason why we do this webinar is to actually help you understand that the tool will provide extremely good performance if well used, but you can also go into situations where you don't get what you were expecting because actually some parameters may be wrongly adjusted. So that's key. StormAudio has the exclusivity until end of this year, so we're very happy to be a strong partner to Dirac. It's been a long journey. We started last summer basically to work on that. It took us some good time on the signal processing side to implement it. It's not a straightforward system, and we require quite demanding processes to manage that. But StormAudio could do it, and we're very, very proud of that. So now let's go into the let's say a generic use case of the calibration. This use case, the generic one, I would say is what should be for 90% of the case, right? In many rooms, you would not have to go into more details in the parameters you have to adjust in Dirac to get really good and decent performance. I mean, if you start digging into the specific use case that I described, this is because either you have really problematic room or speakers, or you're looking for something very special by using the tool. But in a traditional room, standard room with multiple subwoofers, speakers, and all that, this generic use case is what you must follow, and you will experience already extremely nice results. Some prerequisites to working with active room treatment. Obviously, you need to have the right tool, and this is from the 3.6.5 and onward. You need to make sure that your ISP is updated with the 4.5 R0 software. If you're not in that level, please go into our website and check, depending on where you start from, check what the process you need to follow. And when you're good with that, you can start doing the calibration. The good news is that if you have already all your measurement survey done from a previous project, you can restart by using it. Only condition is that it it has enough measurements to satisfy the ART processing. ART requires that it gets enough information about all the speakers, which translates into having sufficient measurements, the minimum being 9. Usually this is what you would cover in most of the calibration you could have done in the past. And lastly, and this is really one of the most important things, you need to know your speakers. With ART, you cannot go blind. You cannot rely specifically on the tool to tell you the truth. No, you need to know by yourself what your speakers are capable of. It is valid for your speakers and your subwoofers. Reason is that you need to enter those parameters precisely in the tool where this is required. So make sure that you get access to your datasheets where you can read the rated bandwidth. Usually this is given with a -3 dB cutoff in high and the low. The most important one is the low frequency response. Reason is that if it's not properly set, the system will start to use your speakers down to some frequencies it cannot handle. So you get overloads, and in the worst case, if you start to play loud, you can damage your speaker. So we don't want that. So we just warn you, make sure you understand and you know your speaker. All right, so the traditional process has to be used. You simply need to start your processor, activate your let's say make your configuration speaker and all that. I mean, you are a StormAudio customer, most of you, so you know what to do. Whenever you are in the Dirac process mode in the ISP, you can start the tool, and then from there you will do your microphone calibration, the selection of the arrangements, the measurements, up to the level you have enough measurements and can go into the filter process. If you already have a project, at that stage, just load your former project and use it, and start with the filter designs. In the filter designs, you will you will end up into a new presentation where actually you will find the speakers group that were already let's say available in the past. Now this is what we call the ART speaker groups. In the bottom left, you will get new parameters that are actually the support groups definition in the frequency range and in whether they contribute or not. And depending on your speaker's configuration, whether you have a lot of speakers in the room or not, you will have also some dots in the support selection slide. Those are the number of filters that each group requires when you activate it. And on the top right, you will see that you have a certain number, and the bottom right, so you will get the filters that you have available. Reason is that if you have systems that have above roughly 20-something channels, you might end up into not enough filters to cover the full support, meaning use any speaker to support any speaker. That requires a lot of filters. Right now, the ISP with the Elite version, you can go up to roughly 500 filters, which is already quite a lot. In some cases, that's not enough. So what happens is that we do indicate you that you have a certain number of filters available, that at some point you may end up that with not enough, and therefore do some selection compromise. I will describe what we do recommend you to do when you start to have to compromise on this. Other information in this page is the what we call the FSISO. That's the maximum support frequency that the system will follow. That can be adjusted. So far, our experience gives us the, let's say, conclusion that you should start with leaving it at 150 Hz. Reason is that it really helps have a very smooth transition between what the active room treatment is doing and what the passive treatment is doing. This is usually, I would say, this is really important to do that, because usually passive treatment, they will be very efficient quite easily without going into complicated or very thick treatments. They are quite efficient down to roughly 200 Hz. So that's nice to be able to start to transition around 150 Hz. And then the last item that is the more traditional one, this is where you see the measurements in the capture, and also where you can take the target curve adjustments. If we look now at the process that we do recommend you to follow, the main focus is to start with the speaker's group definition. By default, following the measurements, the tool will provide you predefined parameters, predefined groups. They're done according to, let's say, usually it's done through different pairs of groups, usually like surround back, then group of tops, etc. Now, what is key to understand is that reason why we do groups is that they can share the same parameters. So if you start adjusting the target curve for a given ART group, this will apply to all the different speakers. Also, and this is when it becomes critical, all the other parameters that are related to the active room treatment, being the support range and support level, is also applied to the speakers of this group. So this is why this is extremely critical to make sure that whatever speakers that is in one group, they have the same acoustic characteristics. When I say acoustic characteristics, is mainly focusing on the low frequency capability. So if you have a speaker in this group that is capable to 40 Hertz and another one that is capable only to go down to 80 Hertz, then you have a problem, because you won't be able to adjust their support in a good way for either or. So in that case, what you have to do is you need to make sure you create groups that are coherent in the parameters. So look at your spec sheet for all of your speakers, identify those who are with very similar frequency response in the low frequency, and make groups according to that to start with. That's the main and the key elements to start with the active room treatment and to avoid any trouble with overload or a poor response of the system. If a speaker do not have a brother somewhere with the same parameter, just create a separate group, leave it alone, that's fine. The good thing is that you will be able to adjust its support parameters independently. You can use it to support any speaker still, right? It does not change anything on that. Whether you have a small number of groups where you have a lot of speakers, or you do have a lot of speakers in different groups, in the end, ART does the same work. The only load is on you, because for each group, you will have to adjust their support parameters in the different ART groups. So that's what you need to keep in mind. Okay, we will illustrate that in a use case. So that's number one. Okay, your second step is that whenever your groups are done, you will select one. I mean, you will start with your group one or another one, but you will start looking at your group, and for each group, you will then adjust which speaker group you want to contribute. So you want as a support, and you will adjust the support, the way it is supporting it. And this is where you need to use the datasheet information, so being the rated power frequency response. As I mentioned, if you do not set your the lowest frequency part in a good way, you will end up with trouble. Just be aware that for speakers, this low support frequency crossover, I mean frequency information, is what is also used to do the let's say more traditional bass management. So if you have a speaker that is limited to 70 Hertz, for example, the bass that are below 70 Hertz will go into the support speakers that are defined in this panel. So right now we're working on this group one, while the bass that are here will go into the other speakers that support it and that are capable to go in low frequencies. So that's really important to keep that in mind. So it is, of course, but it's actually, this is for the same reason, right? You don't want to use a speaker in a frequency that it cannot support. Traditionally, look at the -3 dB cutoff, and that should be fine. If a speaker has really a different SPL capability compared to the others, maybe you want to increase that frequency to make sure that as you are having a higher cutoff, it will play in the higher frequency, and usually the power handling gets much better the more you go into the frequencies. So those are very critical points. So that's your first parameter you need to adjust in the support range frequency adjustment. This is the low part. The high part is less critical in the sense that there is no risk of doing any damage on your system. The only, let's say, impact of this high frequency adjustments, it's the way it contributes up to 150 Hertz to the system. There are, I would say, two cases where you might need to look at adjusting this higher frequency supports in the parameters. Is that if your speaker are really close to you, to the seating area, what can happen is that you can have the directional of arrival audibility that starts to become localized above 80 Hertz. In this case, if you're really close and you start hearing the support of the speaker, well, you can decide to lower the frequency supports down to maybe 100 Hertz or 80 Hertz. That's up to something you have to try maybe, but at least you should lower it. You can also play, and this is what we'll see a bit later, on the support level, but start with the frequency range. That's the first reason why you would play on that for the speakers. The other moment when you may have to adjust that is with the subwoofers. Let's say in installations, you will have two different types of subwoofers that usually are used. The passive subwoofers are full bandwidth in a way. They are, of course, designed to work specifically in the low frequencies, but there is nothing that prevents them to play up to 150 Hertz. In that case, change nothing. Now, for some active subwoofers, there is internally a predefined low-pass filters that usually is around 80 to 100 Hertz. And in this case, you obviously do not want the system, I mean, you don't want ART to believe that it can do something above this frequency. So you will tell the system that, oh, my subwoofer cannot play above 80 or 100 Hertz. So you will move your high frequency support range and you will lower it down to maybe 100 Hertz, so at least down to the low pass filter of your subwoofer. Those are the two main elements where you will have to play. And this is really here, apart from the subwoofer that is really based on the data sheet, the rest, moving the 150 Hertz frequency, is more a matter of the, let's say, speaker positioning, and usually will be identified only by doing some listening tests with different content, especially, and this is where it is more obvious to see, of course, this is when you play your stereo content in your system where ART is playing, because in stereo, the focus is in left and right. And obviously, if playing stereo, you start to have disturbance that you can hear from your surround speakers. When this is when you need to raise the flag and say, ah, maybe here I need to adjust my surround differently because they become too audible. So this is what this is when you need to think about this frequency. The other warning that's I mean, it's not really a warning, but when you play with your parameters adjustments, is that most of the time you will have subwoofers in your system. In this case, but this can also be speakers, right? If you have speakers that can really go down to 20 Hertz and even lower, you can decide whether they play the infra bass. So in this case, for each of the ART group that you adjust, right? So on each of the ART group, if you decide that the subwoofer should support it, we recommend that if the subwoofer can go below 20 Hertz, that you activate the infra bass. How this is done? Very simple. You use the slide and you go down to 20 Hertz for that specific sub, and then you tick the box that is highlighted here on the left. Doing that, the infra bass is activated. Basically, we are bypassing the frequencies below 20 Hertz to the system. So that's really key. And you can do that for your subwoofers, but also if your speakers are capable of that, and do that for all the ART group. One recommendation that we do by experience, and this is mainly related to the fact that we still do bass management in a way. I mean, we ensure that there is no bass loss in the system. We encourage you to make any subwoofer as a support to all the different ART groups that you have defined. So you make sure that you have the best sound reproduction of the system, and that the bass management can be done properly, and that you make sure also that your bass is properly reproduced. And again, you can also for each of the art group that you will use, where you will use your arts, I mean your subwoofers, make sure that you activate the infrabass if they can support it. Talking specifically about the subwoofer group, there are some key recommendations. I mean, whenever you start defining subwoofer in your installation, this is within this group that the LFE signal will be played. So in this group, you will have the bass that can come from the other speakers, where when the subwoofer is defined as a support to another speaker. So that's the bass management as such. But then it also is the LFE signal. What we do recommend to start with, when you are now working on specifically the ART main subwoofer group, we do recommend you to start by only using the subwoofers to support each other. All right. And the main reason is that if you start using too many speakers, even though you may limit their low frequency to like 80 Hertz and go to up to 150 Hertz, you might end up with sensation that the LFE is too heavy in your room. And that's something you want to avoid. And this again is also something that you can identify just by doing some listening tests. So we don't tell you to not do it, but we do recommend you to start by using only the subwoofers to support each other. Now, in some use cases, specifically, for example, in a system where you have a nice LCR system with only 2 subwoofers in your front wall, and we see that quite a lot, you can start thinking to use your LCR speakers, at least L and R, to support the subwoofer in the LFE reproduction. The main reason is that because of their proximity, the let's say directional of arrival issue becomes really not a problem at all. And usually subwoofers will most likely go to up, I mean, cleanly from 80, I mean, up to 80-900 Hertz, while your speakers, LCR especially, can usually go easily down to 70 Hertz something. So you can make sure that you have a nice overlap of your subwoofer and LCR speakers in that frequency range below 150 Hertz. This way you make sure that the LFE signal is integrally, or let's say, I'm not sure this is the right English word, right? But is fully reproduced in a nice way. That's number one. Number two is that you help the subwoofers and you help HART to have more freedom to control the bass reproduction from your front wall. So that's really where you can think of adding the left, center, right speakers. By experience, you find a lot of systems now where the LCR can go down to like 40 or even 30 Hertz. Using this as a support to the subwoofers gives magic. I mean, it's unbelievable because your speakers go as low as they can. So the bass that are supposed to be coming from your left speakers remain in the left speakers as low as they can. Subwoofer will help them to go lower. But on the other hand, your speakers will participate into supporting your subwoofers. So your bass will be extremely well controlled over the listening space. And I've been into setup where I was actually in a room where we have LCR with 2 subs in the front and I have a row just next to the back wall. And we could, using HART, we could have an extremely nice bass reproduction in the last row. Very tight, etc. A little bit of, I mean, a bit more level than in the row before, but still in a very clean way and very even all in the complete path. So that was extremely nice. So that's one interesting tip. And only you can try to use more, but we don't recommend that. We do recommend to keep the LFE, let's say, in speakers that are close to your subwoofers and and capable. So that's key about the subwoofer groups. We mentioned the topic of having limitations on the number of filters. In that case, you may end up with the need to do some compromise. what we do recommend is that in a room, the main problems comes from the very low frequencies, right? Because of the room modes, because of the difficulty to have tight bass and all that. So we recommend you to start prioritizing the best support definition for your subwoofer group, okay? Whenever you're done with that, start with your ear level speakers. So your traditional SCR, surround back, etc. If you still have filters, then you can start involving the height speakers. And you go step by step this way until you have no filters left. And usually, when you start using all your filters, I can tell you that you have already defined a lot of support. And what we've experienced is that you don't need to have, I mean, you start to have a good sound reproduction with good control already with a limited number of support. So that's the rules that we invite you to follow. I'm confident that in most of installations, you will not even see the number of filters because the system will have enough to have the full support. So that really depends, but just be aware that this can happen. And finally, whenever you have defined your different support levels, you will start looking at the target curve. So this is more the traditional way you use Dirac. And in this case, you have different ways to adjust your target curve. Either you trust StormAudio with the experience that we've built amongst multiple rooms we've calibrated. We have defined a target curve that, of course, is based on some of the studies based, I mean, that Todd Welty's, Floydie Tool, etc. were doing in the past, that were leading to a curve that has a higher frequency. I mean, like you have a low shelving filter in the low frequency that can go between like 4 or 6 dB, depending on the room. And also on the high frequency, you have a high shelving filters that will lower the high frequency. This is a traditional curve that works pretty well. There is no one target curve, right? It's depending on the room, on the speakers type, on the way it behaves in terms of, let's say, also boundary riffing and all that. So, but usually one thing is has been clearly experienced every time: a flat target curve does not work well. So adjust that. You can obviously go into the auto target curve, so using the high and low shelf items that you have here. But you can also use the filters, so by toggling here the dots, where you can define point per point your EQs. So that's about the target curve. Whenever you're done with the target curve, you can go into calculate. Just be aware that this can take time, depending on the number of speakers, depending on the number of support filters that you have defined. The process can go up to 10 to 15 minutes. So don't worry about it. Do not do not interrupt the process. Just let it go. And whenever this is done, you will end up with the proposal of the corrections, and you can proceed to your filter export, which is traditionally a selection of a slot, then a definition of a name that you will understand when you are in the ISP, and export the filter to the products. It takes some time to get the filters loaded. You will then define your listening area, eventually change your description, save. You will then again save your speaker configuration. So you go out of the edit mode, and you will create a preset that will help you go through the listening tests that are really critical to ensure that the calibration you have defined is good, right? It's really, calibration is about trial and error. I mean, you will define the first profile that you will listen. Usually it doesn't work the first time. I mean, doesn't work. You might have to readjust here and there a little bit. Then you go back to the tool, you recreate a profile until you're very happy. So that's what you have to do. One thing very important is that with ART, it requires a lot of filters. We do now have multiple layout systems. So overall, the ISP can have up to 20 Dirac profiles shared amongst all the different layouts that you have. So if you start going to 20 profiles, Dirac will actually not allow you to do a new calibration. So you will have to select some profiles to kill to create new profiles. But 20 profiles, Dirac profiles, is already a good number. All right. So we've been looking at a very traditional, not traditional, the generic use case. So that's the case that we do recommend you to follow. What we'll do now is I'm proposing you to actually look at how it is happening. Okay, let me take one thing here. Okay, right now, let's look at how it works on the ISP and what you should do. So you will go into your profile that you defined. When you want to do art, you have nothing to do in the ISP before going into the calibration, apart from making sure that all your speakers are left independent, so that you did not create groups. This is valid, of course, if you have multi-way speakers. This is where you need to ensure that they are as a group. Now, whenever this is well defined, you start your Dirac process in the tool. You go into launching Dirac, and you will start loading the tool. The tool will normally detect your ISP. All right, it's coming up right now. So the device has been detected. So you connect to it. Whenever you are in the tool, you can either go through the traditional process, select of the microphone calibration curves, adjust the level, select an arrangement, do the measurements, or if you already have a project, you can load your project. The projects will go into the the filter design page. And in this page, this is what it will look like when you select the art. As I mentioned, you will have the number of, for each of the group, you will see in the window the measured response, the proposed target curve, and the estimated support range. So by default, Dirac will activate for all the art groups the full support. And as you can see, it will do some recommendation on the support range. So this is when you have your first warning. Do not trust that, right? Dirac for any speakers will limit at 50 Hertz if a speaker is detected to go lower than that. When I mean detected, is mean measured. But as you know, in the room, you are not measuring the near field, you're measuring the far field, meaning that you take into account the room gain, what translates into those frequencies that you get here could be the results of also the position of the speakers that emphasize the low frequency. So that's not because it's capable to do it, it's because at a certain level pressure, it can do that. So this is when you start to look at your data sheet and you start to adjust that, okay? But what we mentioned originally is that you will first look at the groups, and you need to make sure that each group, all the speakers are with the same acoustical characteristics. So in my setup, I have LCR that are the same. Here, if you do not have in mind to do a different support, you can put the center together. Or if you want to make sure that I want to keep the center alone, and this is what one of the recommendations that we can do is that if your center channel is not really highly capable in terms of SPL, you might want to not use it as a support in the system, because the dialogues, the center channel is where you have maybe 70% of the time the use in home cinema. So it gets already a lot of energy from just the content. So by loading it with more, by using it on art, might not be relevant. So that really depends on your center channel capability. So you can leave it alone or put it together. You could decide to stay with that, and then you need to adjust for each art group the different parameters. Or if you know that you want to stay with the generic case where you want to have a uniform support and all that, you can group the speakers that have the same acoustic characteristics. Like in our setup here, we are using MNK speakers, and all the surrounds and top layers, they are with S150 from MNK. They're all the same, so we can have the same support parameters definition. And then I have my subwoofer. So right now you see it limits the number of groups to only 4. So this gives you less adjustment to do. Okay, that's one thing. But the consequence of that is, of course, you do not have the flexibility to decide for each speaker how you want the support to be. Now we are covering the generic case here, meaning in this case, I want to make sure that I leave Dirac to do the job in its full support in an even way for all the speakers. So first, you adjust your frequency, right? And you do that for all your speakers. So what I know is that my front speakers are definitely capable to go down to 70 Hz without any problem, while my other speakers, so the group 2 being, no, the group 2 is the center, it can also go to 70 Hz. My group 3 is the other speakers. They are usually roughly not capable to go lower than 90 Hz, so I will adjust that there. And my subwoofer, on the contrary, is definitely capable to go to 20 Hz, and I will activate the infrabass. You need to do that for all your speakers. So we don't want to spend time to do that now. So I will load a project. I will load a project where I already defined all the different supports, but this is based on the same based projects. So what you will end up into is that whenever you're done with all your supports, you can navigate through your different groups and see that they were adjusted in a certain way. Okay, then you go into your subwoofer group, and you can see that as we recommended it in my setup, in the generic one, I'm starting by only using the subwoofer to support each other. So you will make sure that you click the group. Here, the subwoofer, you should see that calculate becomes selectable. If you do not click here, it means that you are not using the other subwoofer to support the main sub. So you need to make sure that you select it. So that's the adjustment. So whenever you're done with the support range definition, so as I mentioned, you have made sure that here the frequencies are correctly adjusted. So I limited to 100 Hz my different S150 speakers. I limited to 70 Hz low frequency my 300 LCR speakers. Now I'm happy. The next step is to load the target curve. In this illustration here, I have loaded the StormAudio recommended curves. And you have 3 different curves that we recommend: curves for the LCR speakers and curves for the surrounds, and then for your subwoofer. So you can load them, or if you prefer, you can stay with the well, anytime it wants to do it. Oh, sorry, I need to go into the rights. So you can decide to go into adjusting with the auto target curve, or you can do with the manual target curve. So that's your choice, and this is definitely the thing. So going back to the subwoofer, in the basic configuration, you can see that I have my 4 subwoofers of my room. They are all in the same group. Okay, so that's my ART subwoofer group. What happens, and this is not visible here, but if you do not select it, if you do not click here, or let's say in other words, if you see that calculate cannot be selectable, it's because you did not define any support to your subwoofer, and the system to work needs to provide support to your main subwoofer. Our recommendation to start with is to make sure that all subwoofers will support your main subwoofer. So you need to make sure you select that. Okay, I did forget to adjust that here, but obviously you need to do that for your subwoofer. So this is what you have to do. Okay, so that answers the question from Joe about making sure that you select your subwoofer as a support to your subwoofer. As I described, you could decide to go further by adding the the left-right speakers, for example, to support the subwoofer. Maybe this is something you want to do, and if you do decide to do that, because left-right speakers are in the front wall. Maybe you have subwoofers not far from it, and you want to make sure that it really helps a lot in the frequency from 70 to 150. This is how you would do it, right? So you would add your left-right speakers into that. And for subwoofer, in the generic use case, this is what we would recommend, to not go further than that. Do not add more to start with. Whenever you're done, you will select the calculate filters, and then it takes some time to do it. And I will not do it now. I will just show you with the post exports. And in that case, this is post calculation, right? So this is the station where I mentioned it can take up to 15 minutes to calculate. So that's something you want to do not that multiple times. So still, it takes some time to load the project, but it's coming now. Right. So whenever you are with the let's say post calculated, you have different things that you can do within the tool. You can decide to remove your target curve and verify what the sorry, you can see. So this is the measured, this is the estimated response, okay? But there is something also that is quite interesting. You have the variations of what you measured. So this is where you can visualize how different here the measurements are in your listening space. So that means that you have one seat that can be at -30 in that frequency, while in another seat it is at plus almost 5. So huge variation. When you start going into the active room treatment, you can see that the variation is actually much tighter in the low frequency, to the extent of only ±4 dB here, which is quite a strong achievement. And you also realize that here the transition is really smooth, and that is also what you're looking for. And this is what you experiment with ART, that the low, medium, or the high bass, the high frequency bass are really well reproduced. So those are the different things that you can visualize with the tool. Whenever you're done, you proceed to filter export, and you follow the process, the usual process. So this is for the traditional use case. Now I want to talk about more specific things, and that's where I would like to talk about now. So specific use case, what do we have? We've been looking at mainly the support range frequency as parameter to adjust, of course, together with the support selection. Okay. Now there are use cases where you need to do more, and this is where you might need to change the support balance, the support level, in combination with the support frequency range. Usually this is because you want to have a different energy, let's say, a spread on the room. So in some use cases, you may be looking for having more energy in your front wall versus the back wall for your subwoofer. So that's one use case. The other use case is the one we already covered a little bit, is that depending on the proximity of some speakers, you have the direction over eyeball audibility. So that's a use case you need to adjust, and where you need to know some tricks. And also, ART can help you create directional bass management. The way this can be done is that you can access in the tool, you can access new parameters. And this is when you toggle here the triple dots, you can see you have now support level parameters in addition to the frequency support low and high. You have also this FSSISO that we recommend to leave at 150 Hz, but this can be adjusted if you wish, but that's to be tried. The other parameters mainly is the support level. And support level is something that is not with, let's say, the instinctive behavior, because it is actually by lowering the support level that you increase the capacity of ART to use that speaker as a support. So this translates into the lower the support level you adjust, the higher the energy you put into the subwoofer as a support to a certain subwoofer or speakers, right? So that's the one thing you need to keep in mind, is that the adjustment is kind of different from what you would think of. So the lower the level, the higher the support. Let's make it this way, or the higher the contribution. That's the new parameters that you will be using. So let's look at one of the specific use case. This is about shifting the contribution, from one speaker to another, or from one subwoofer to another. So if we refer to this need, can be the case if you have in your room multiple subwoofers, right? But those subwoofers may be different, with different capabilities. Especially some subwoofers can go very low in frequencies, while some are extremely efficient around 50 Hz and above. So those would not be used the same way. Since by default Dirac will put them all together, what you want to do is to change that. So the first thing is that you will split the subwoofers into different groups, into individual groups. That allows you to adjust specific support range per subwoofer, and you can also play on the support level to adjust their let's say a contribution to the system. So if you have a subwoofer that can really handle a lot of SPL, you will leave the support level high. But if you see that there is a limit, well, you can lower the contribution, so by increasing the support level. Again, this is a matter of the rated capability of your subwoofer. What you need to keep in mind, and this is really critical for your subwoofer arrangement, is that the way ART works is that you have one main subwoofer, and this is the first subwoofer in the list that gets the full range LFE signal. This is the one that will provide the more SPL in the system. The other subwoofer will work as a support to extend this LFE reproduction and make sure that your listening area is with a very nice seat-to-seat contribution, so limited seat-to-seat variation. With that in mind, you need to make sure that the subwoofer that is in the first place in your system is the one that is the highest capable, number one, and most likely in a room, this is a subwoofer that you want to be in your front wall. So if that's not the case, you need to go back to your definition, your system definition in the ISP, and what you can start with. If that's not the case, you will have to go into the output mapping and change the position of your sub into making these front subs as the first subwoofers in your system. Okay. Once this is done, you can go back to the ISP, but unfortunately, you would have to redo all the measurements if you discover that only at that moment. So you need to make sure that you first define your subwoofers correctly before you go into Dirac. Now, whenever this is done, you have your correct subwoofers in the front. You can adjust their capability, and this is done quite easily. So if we go back to the tool, if I now take all right, so if I load my basic project again, so I can see questions popping up. Don't worry, I will answer them, even though they are related to other stuff. I will definitely answer them. Okay, so we are in our situation where actually my subwoofer are different. So as my subwoofer are different, I don't want to have a single support range frequency information and potentially also the support level. So what you have to do is that you need to split your subwoofer into different groups. So you will put them as individual sub. Obviously, if you have subwoofers that have the exact same characteristic, you can put them together. But right now, I will just illustrate the fact that you can have them fully individual. Now that they are independent, you can see that the three last subwoofer, they do not have any definition of target curve, because those subwoofers will only be used as support. While on the other hand, if you go to your first subwoofer, of course, I need to select my target curve. So I repeat myself, if you go to the support, to the other subs, there is no target curve. It's because the signal that you will adjust with the target curve is what is supposed to be played by your main subwoofer and with the support of the other subwoofers. So now I'm in my subwoofer groups. In my subwoofer group, by default, because I changed the groups, Dirac will have used all the different speakers as support. Number one rule, you take out all your speakers to start with. And now you end up with 4 subwoofers. This one is the main sub. You want to make sure that you select it as support itself, right? And then you can decide here whether you want the subs to support, but more importantly, this is where you can adjust their contribution with a different frequency response. So maybe you are in a system where actually your sub that is here, the main sub, can go very low in frequency, but it's not really good above 80 Hertz. Well, this is where using your other subs that might be more capable in above 80 Hertz, that you will use and combine them this way. So that's the first thing you can adjust. By having them independent, they can still be added as a support into your ART subwoofer group, but then you can adjust individually their support frequency range. And now if you go into the details here, you will be able to also define for each of these sub a different support level. Let's say that one of the subwoofer is definitely not a strong one. Maybe what you want to do is actually adjust it. Sorry, I made it the opposite. You wanted to adjust it with a lower contribution. In that case, you need to set an higher support level. So by changing the nominal level, that is -18 to -12, what you are doing now is that you are instructing ART to not use the group 8, which is one of the subwoofer, to not use it as, a lot. It will be used at a lower level. And in the end, that translates into making sure that it does not get overloaded over time, right? But what it also translates into is that, well, it's not going to maybe used enough for the ART behavior. But at least in your system, you get a balanced behavior. Your subwoofer will be used as it should be in terms of datasheet, characteristic. So that's one use case where you want to split your subwoofers individually to make sure that they are with the correct characteristics. So that's one use case. The other use case where you want to shift the energy is where you want to have a contribution balance that is different in the room. So a typical case is with subwoofers, 4 subwoofers, where you want to have maybe more energy coming from your front wall and less from the back wall. In that case, what you will do is that first, as I already mentioned, that you need to make sure that your main sub is in the front wall. What you'll do is that the second subwoofer that is in the front wall, that you want to be the stronger support to the main speakers in the main subwoofer, you will put it in a separate group. And you can keep the other subs in the main group, and with that you will adjust the support level differently. You will make sure that the front sub is with the highest support, so the highest support, so the lowest level, and the opposite for the back subwoofer. You can lower their contribution by increasing their support. So if we go back to the tool. So what I just mentioned is that this subwoofer, for example, is my right sub, while the main subwoofer is the left front. I can decide that my 2 subwoofers in the back, actually I can put them back into my main group. The only sub that I took out is my right subwoofer. So now if I focus on adjusting my ART subwoofer group, I will deselect the speakers because, as I mentioned, I don't want the speakers to be support. I will make sure that, this one is also a speaker. So I will make sure that I select my group 5 where I have my 2 back subwoofer together with my main front left subwoofer. I want to make sure so those two subs support my main sub. And here I will also have my other subwoofer. Let's say they are with the same capability. But now what I will do is I want to make sure that my group 6 subwoofer, it is the one that is front right wall together with my left subwoofer. I want this subwoofer to be with the strongest contribution. So this one, I'm going to select it at, for example, -24, while this one, so group 5 is the subwoofer group. I make sure that this is selected as a support. And then this one, I would do the opposite. I would actually lower its contribution by increasing the level. So you can decide how you make it. You can go as low as -6, or you can try that, which means that you really shift the support to the front wall. I mean, the energy to the front wall, and you can try with that. Whenever you're happy, then you can again calculate and export your filters. What you need to keep in mind when you do that is that yeah, I can mention that. If you do this way, if you want to have more energy from your front wall, this is also when you need to consider your LCR speakers as participating to this LFE reproduction and create this front wave experience that the bass is really synchronized and coming from your front wall and from all the capable speakers. You can also decide here to add the left-right speakers and adjust their contribution to the frequency capability they are of. And again, here, now that you have added them, you can go into the support group and decide, because it is selected now, that this one will contribute in the support of the subwoofer into a higher level. But if you do that, you need to make sure that they are capable of. But that's something you can do. You can decide. Again, it's something that you need to try, verify. If you're not happy, just go back to the nominal adjustments. It is very critical that you always compare to the nominal one. But at least you can do that if you want, okay? What you need to keep in mind when you do that is that, and this is something that is the case for every change you do in the support level and the number of support speakers you bring, is that if you lower the contribution, you remove some of the degrees of freedom that ART has to optimize the seat-to-seat variation and the response, the impulse response control in the room. So you remove a little bit of contribution, or let's say control, to ART. So this is something you need to balance. You need to play with and try to define as you wish. That's the way you can do, right? So that's a way that's in the end. It's not similar to doing a base array, a dual base array. I will describe that a little bit later, how you can try to simulate that. But this does a good job in balancing more energy in your front wall. Okay, the other moment where you want to have different adjustments, another use case is when you have the direction of arrival audibility issue. And this is mainly the case if you are very close to like the surround speakers. So in this case, you will make sure that you have your surround speakers in a separate group, and you will adjust their frequency range. So the high point, you will lower it. And if this is not enough, you can also increase the support level, so you decrease the contribution. So how this is illustrated, if you were to do that in my setup here, you would take your left surround, you would put it in a separate group. So you take it out, sorry, you will take it out of this group. You will put your two surround speakers, because I would say the same problem happens there. And then wherever you are using the group 3 as a support, right? So if I go, for example, into my left front, I have my group 3. You can keep it here, but what you will do is that you may want to lower the higher frequency to something roughly below 100 Hertz. So you reduce this audibility issue that you can have. If this is not enough, you will go into the adjustments, the detailed adjustments, and you will adjust your group 3 level with a lower contribution, maybe -12. So that's what you can do to reduce the contribution of some selected speakers. Okay, I hope this is clear enough. You can actually go even further, right? It's not a recommendation, it's just for you to play with. But if you think about a room, in the room you have a symmetrical behavior. So you can estimate that actually, because of this symmetricality, what you want to do is that the left speakers, you will make such a way that they have less support from the right speakers in the room. So this is also something that you can do. If you want to do that, this is when you have to create and you have to separate all your different speakers in different groups, and then I just manually the support, both frequency and level, to match what you're looking for. So let's say that if you want, you're playing in the main group, if you want to have the left front let's say if you have your left front group, sorry, you will lower the support range of the right surrounds. You will have lower support from the right surround, sorry, than from the left surround. So okay, so that means that the speakers that are close to the left speakers will provide more supports and than the one that are on the right side. It's not something we advise you to do. It's just if you want to play with that, this is something you can do. Again, I will repeat myself several times here. If you start playing around with the support range is one thing, but more importantly, with the support level, you are definitely removing degrees of freedom for art to perform as it should be in terms of having a perfect impulse response control. All right. Additional use case that you may want to look at is in some room where you have a lot of subwoofers, you might want, and of course in the right locations, you might want to create some local kind of base management, local support. So in that case, what you have to do is that you have to create groups where you have all your left speakers. For example, if we think about having subwoofers in the side walls, those subwoofers may support efficiently the speakers on the left and also the height effects that are on the top. So you will create groups with the left speakers in one hand, groups with the right speakers on the other hand. You will split your different subwoofers and then define the supports accordingly. So if we go back to the tool, and if we want to let's say see how this can be adjusted, you will look for the directional base management, as we would call, if we can call this way. It's kind of interesting in some rooms to be able to do that, and the good thing is that when you do that, yes, you will remove a little bit of the art capability using the subwoofer freely to drive, I mean, to help compensate for, like, if you have the left subwoofer, they will not contribute much for the right speakers, that's for sure, but you can still use all your subs to support the main subwoofers that drive the LFE. So for the main low frequency response that is, I would say, highly driven by the LFE reproduction, you can still have whole subs to contribute with the main subwoofers. But at the same time, you will have the possibility to have localized directional support for your different speakers. So how is this done? Well, the first thing you will have to do, as illustrated here, you will create groups where you have all your left speakers, another group where you have all your right speakers, and then you will split your subwoofers according to what they have to do. So maybe that in my room, I have my two front subwoofers between the left and right speakers that are mainly for the LFE reproduction, I would say. And then you will split the other two subs. And when you go into the support of the, for example, the left surround group, for example, here, what you will do is that you're not going to use the other speakers, but what you will do is that maybe you want to try that the surround speakers are only supported. I think you want to keep the other main subs, right? But at least on the sides, you want to make sure that the left surround will get the supports. So actually, my right subwoofer is this one. Both subwoofers can go down to the infra base. So what I have done now is that I am in my surround group. I have made sure that the group 3, so all the speakers in the group support each other. So they are all in the left side. I've set such a way that the front subwoofer will also participate, because actually you want to give enough freedom to the tool to adjust a good response in the listening area. But you have selected a subwoofer that is very close to this one. And in this case, what you can do is that you can also go into stating to the system that, oh, actually the group surround needs to be in the support. So you want to have this left subwoofer, right? Left side subwoofer. You want it to contribute more. That means you need to provide a lower level, such as -24. So when you do that, those subs will contribute more to help the left speakers in their response, okay, in their impulse response. You keep the main subwoofer, and also the left speakers will support each other. So that's the way you can do. And of course, you need to do it in the symmetrical way. Which means that you will select your speakers that are on the right to be support to each other, and you will select the front subwoofers. And this time, instead of selecting the left side subwoofer, you will select the right side subwoofer that you will mention as contributor, and you can optionally also go into the support range and indicate that this subwoofer needs to contribute more by lowering the support level. So that's one way to have a kind of directionality, a little bit more directionality on the low frequency. Some calibrators, some installers like to do that. I don't say that's good or bad. It's something that you have to try. The only thing that you need to always keep in mind is that as soon as you go into this kind of exotic adjustments, you start to go a little bit away from the main purpose of ART being to use more evenly all the speakers to support each other. But it can also create a very nice thing by keeping the bass that are coming from the sidewall, the side speakers, by keeping them on the sidewall. And that's considering that, especially with the new codec like Dolby Atmos, you will get a lot of low frequency content coming from there, not only because of the LFE, but also because those speakers are playing down to 20 Hz. So by creating this localized bass management, you help keep the bass in that side, and that's great. And the good thing is that if you now go into your main subwoofer support group, and this is what I wanted to emphasize also, is that if you go into your main subwoofer group, you will still make sure that all your subwoofers, they contribute evenly to the whole bass management and LFE reproduction. By doing this, you are making sure that your seat-to-seat variation will be limited, at least considering the LFE signal. What is certainly the most critical one being played evenly on all the subwoofers, right? So that's how the system can be adjusted if you want to create directional bass reproduction. Optional steps, this is what, the optional step is, as I mentioned, is to, if you have additional subs, so what did I say here? Okay, directional bass management for each main speakers, that is covered. Limit support range of the other subwoofers, okay, and reduce the support level to -6 if you wish. So that depends of the number of subwoofers that you have in the capability. That's about it. Let me go back to the tool to illustrate what we just mentioned now. So if you look at your left wall subwoofer, what I did mention is that you always want to keep the two front subwoofers. If you want to strengthen the contribution of, or let's say to strengthen the sensation to get more bass from that side wall, you will go into the first subwoofer group, and this one you could potentially, if you want, decrease its contribution by increasing its support level. So that will balance more energy to the side subwoofer and the side speakers. So this is the latest parameters that is described here. Once again, I do emphasize that you always need to think about comparing what you've done with the nominal adjustments that ART is providing. It is very similar to doing equalization when you do a manual calibration. As soon as you start tweaking a frequency, you want to make sure that actually it does the right job. So you will listen to it. You will make sure you check with your content, your specific content, that this is what you were looking for. You can also verify doing some measurements as well. Okay, now one additional point, and this will answer the question about how can we make something similar to the dual base array. In some rooms, and this is what we have done at the Iron Show demo, actually, because we were a little bit afraid of the overall SPL we could get out of the system. At the Iron Show, we had a room that was with the ceiling completely open, which means that our subwoofer were exciting a room that was more than 100 square meters, close to 200 actually. So that was huge. So we were afraid that our subs would need more strength. So we decided that the front wall subwoofers would be an array. So we physically daisy chained them. So the ISP only saw them as one sub. So the first two subwoofers in the front wall were like acting like one subwoofer. And the other subs, so we had 5 additional subwoofers in that room, they were left as support to those 2 subwoofers. So when you do that, you will create a front wave of low frequency. So of course it depends on the number of subwoofers you have in the front wall and the way they are located, but you will create a kind of energy wave that comes from the front wall, and the other sub will be used to support this subwoofer. And what you need to make sure, of course, is that your front subwoofers, if you array them, if you daisy chain them, is that they have the same phase and level adjustment to make sure that you get something that is proper. In a way, it acts like a dual base array, but it's not at all the theory of it. But in the fact that you have the energy that is pushed by some subwoofers and then compensated by the others, that's what you try to do when you do a dual base array. So that's something very interesting. Again, if you do that, you need to be cautious. At least if you start playing with the support level of the support subwoofers, is that ART, by having these subwoofers working together, do not see them individually, so they cannot use them individually to help adjust the system in the room. But from the experience we've had, it's working quite okay. It does really a good job, and it's totally fine to try it. Okay. But if you think that in a room it's fine, your main subwoofer is highly capable to provide the SPL, the other will support and bring also some energy, I think this is fine to stay with the generic adjustment. The last use case that we need to cover, it's system where you actually do not have any subwoofer, and that happens. And this is actually one of the main advantage of ART. It brings a lot of great things, but what I like very much is that it helps systems where you do not have subwoofers, such as, for example, the Violet Phantom custom systems. You can just define your setup without sub and use ART in a great way. So what you need to know and keep in mind when you go into such setup is that you will define your systems without subwoofer. And when you do that, by default, the ISP will drive the LFE signal directed to the left and right speakers evenly with -5 dB. This is the standard practice. Now, if you have more speakers that are capable to drive the LFE, you might want to actively have them playing the LFE signal from the routing of the LFE signal in the ISP before ART is even playing. So you can activate the with LFE into more speakers. And the only thing you need to be very careful of is that you need to make sure that you keep the balance of the LFE reproduction. The more reproducer of LFE you add to the system, the lower each of them, the lower level of each of them should be, right? So right now, -5 dB is what we had to adjust to make sure the LFE is balanced when it is placed in both the left and right. If you start adding speakers, make sure that you at least decrease by like 2 dBs each of them, and verify that you maintain the same balance as if you had only the 2 speakers playing the LFE. And that's critical, but that's the only thing you have to take care of. And doing that, all speakers will play the LFE, and ART will align all of them, making sure that they support each other and all that. And this is working very fine. We cannot guarantee that this is going to bring the best performance, but the most important thing is that if you want to do that, you need to make sure, of course, that your speakers can do it. Can support the LFE frequencies. So that's the last use case that we wanted you to understand and cover. It is definitely a great thing about being able to use systems where you do not have subwoofer. ART really helps extend the low frequency reproduction of any speaker in the setup, what was not possible so far, and what all the other calibration tools are not capable to offer. So that's really key, and that's about it. So now it concludes, I would say, what I wanted to present. So I'm going to go through your questions now. Feel free to add more, and let's go through them now. All right. So question about. Right, it's more practical. Download of the presentation. If you look at the panel where you can ask your questions, somewhere you should have a way to select the file and to download it. So if you do not have it, make sure you can email us and we will provide the slides to you. Okay, so what's the best practice when using Storm Dirac with amplifiers that have their own calibration tools? For example, L-acoustics, and even more complicated when you have only front and subs on L-acoustics and then Atmos and surround on amp without their own calibration. Okay, so I'm not too familiar on the way the L-acoustics amps are adjusted, but I think you should not confuse what we call the kind of anechoic behavior that you're looking for certain speakers. You should not confuse that with the room correction. So that means how the speaker behaves when it is in the room. I think what the L-acoustics is mainly doing in speakers that it manages directly, it's about adjusting their EQs to make sure that their response is as it should be and post-factory. I would say this is what mainly it should be about. And if this is what it is, then just keep doing this, meaning that you configure your amplifiers with your EQs as required by the manufacturer of your speakers. And from there, whenever you start using Dirac, you use Dirac ART as you were supposed to be doing with the ISP alone. It's very similar to when you do active multi-way speakers configuration in the ISP. You can have your multi-way channels with all of them having some adjustments. If you use also, for example, speakers like StormAudio that require let's say pre-configuration EQs, to match the expectation of the anechoic measurements, anechoic chamber measurements, you would do the same. So you would adjust all your EQs manually create your multi-ways, and then what you do is that you group those multi-ways as one speaker for Dirac, and Dirac will see a speaker. It will take the measurements. Obviously, because you made some pre-EQ, this measurement will have a quite decent response, and Dirac will work on top of that. So there is no contradiction here. Now, if this is something that is linked to like microphone measurements done by L Acoustics to adjust something, then this is different. Then we would have to potentially even discuss with L Acoustics what they think and adjust that accordingly. Okay, the next question is ISR Fusion will show at the CDR Expo? Well, it's not related to art, but the answer is yes. Okay. All right. Question about when you use a former project to go through Dirac ART, whether there is a difference between the measurement survey you did with this project versus if you were doing new measurements. No, there is no difference. What the tool will do is that it will use the measurement survey and compute them completely newly with the new process. And that is applied identically whether you just took measurements or whether you took the initial measurements. So there is no issue here. We have a question about the oh, he left the meeting, but okay, there was a question about the infra base. Yes, so when you are in the tool and you are using subwoofers to support speakers in groups, I will just focus on this one, but if the subwoofer is capable of the infra base, you need to, it is advised, it's not a recommendation, but I would say it is advised to select the infra base. Now, it is more important to make sure you do it when you are in the main subwoofers group adjustment, because this is where the LFE signal comes, and we know there is extremely low frequency content. I am not too sure with the other signals. The mixers put a lot of low energy below 20 Hertz. So in that case, the fact to select or not the infra base, I'm not sure it's going to make a difference. With that said, it's also fine to say, okay, my subwoofer are capable to go down to whatever frequency below 20. I don't want to think whether there is or not signal there. I will make sure that if there is signal, I cover it. So select the infra base for any subwoofer when it is used as a support. Okay, next question. Is the crossover set in the amp or by designing target curve in Dirac? Okay, it's a nice question, and this is very important then to go back to that and clarify again what it is. There is no such crossover adjustment anymore with ART. You're not physically adjusting, or you're not adjusting a crossover for like bass management you were doing so far. The way the tool works is that you define for each speaker of a support, you will define their capability. So when you define here, for example, that these speakers of group 1 will support each other down to 70 Hertz, it means two things. It means that ART will use the signals of all the other speakers, will use the different speakers and define filters for all these speakers within this group and play these filters down to 70 Hertz and no lower than that. So this is what it means. It means that it defines the support range that ART will use. Okay. The second thing that this adjustment means is that 70 Hertz acts in a similar way as the traditional bass management crossover used to be. So when I set to 70 Hertz here, it means that any frequency below 70 Hertz will be played by the other support speakers or subwoofers that are defined in this group. It will take those frequencies and support them down to 20 Hertz or lower if you take the infra base. So do not think base management anymore. Think speaker reproduction capability. How low can my speaker play? I just adjust that. I will adjust this low frequency to what it can play. Then it is used to make sure that there is no signal loss. It's played in the different speakers. Okay, next question. Okay, when you are using a support speaker, example the surround, you are sitting next to it, do you think you should not just push the frequency higher, but remove that speaker from the group and not use the speaker for support at all? It's a good question. To me, I think this is a matter of the use case, but what we've seen is that the direction of arrival audibility is not that big an issue. So by at least reducing the support range frequency usually helps a lot already. And as a second step, lowering the contribution, so by increasing the support level, gets even further. Now, between not selecting this speaker as a support because it's close versus adjusting it as I described, I can think that ART will do maybe a better job in adjusting the impulse response because it can still use this speaker, okay, to some extent in a lower way, but it can still use it. So here it's a trial and error, and there is nothing wrong in removing it. Again, you know, what we've experienced is that you don't have to have all the support, or let's say the support from all the speakers to get a good behavior of the system. You need to make sure that in the room, you have a good coverage. For example, you want to make sure that you have speakers that are evenly distributed on the support speakers you select, because the reflections are coming from all the walls. So you want to make sure that the compensation you get is controlled all around you. So as soon as you make sure you have a good distribution of support speaker in your room, that's fine. Whether you use all of them, not for sure. So you can, of course, take some out. Okay, next question. If the rack define normal subs and infrasub in one group, is it actual to create separate group for infrasub only? Okay. What you need to keep in mind is that when you define subwoofer groups, it is basically the main subwoofer that will have the full bandwidth. So the first subwoofer that will have the full bandwidth LFE reproduction. So this is the one that is the most critical to adjust as reproducing the LFE, the infrabass. The other subs, if they are capable, you can have them supporting them to as low as that. But just keep in mind that actually, and this is why you might, let's say, leave the infrabass out, ART will only work efficiently from 20 Hz to 150 Hz. Frequency below 20 Hz, they're not considered within ART, they are simply bypassed. So what is critical is to make sure that your main subwoofer in the support group, right, in the main subwoofer groups, that you at least make sure that your main subwoofer is with the infrabass support. The others, you can leave them alone and just supporting from 20 or as low as they can do, and up to like 150 Hz. So that's what you would do. Okay, so this is done. Okay. Right, question about this description I made about simulating a double bass array. I cannot tell you whether it's going to be better or not. We've seen in some rooms that it is nice to do that because the room might be quite big and you really want to have this sensation of having a front wave going through the room. So that's something that you may want to try. So the room, yeah, unfortunately, there is a question about whether we did measurements in the ion showroom. Unfortunately, we didn't have the time to do that. But from at least the listening test we could do, that was what we could experience. Okay. Question about the type of subwoofers. Do they have to be the same type or not? It's always good practice to try to use the same subwoofers, because doing this way, you can use them identically in terms of support, and you really ensure that you have an homogeneous correction. You know, it's very similar to when you have different speakers types. To maintain the timbre balance is not simple. So in the same way, if you have subwoofers that are capable in the same frequency range with the same SPL, you can make sure that the system can use them evenly, and you provide then a very homogeneous sound reproduction. So that's a recommendation, I would say, to use similar subwoofers. But if you cannot, then make sure that your adjustments follows your subwoofer requirements. So you will have to split your subs and adjust them independently. Okay, so I can see that for some of you, you don't have that this is weird, because I do see the presentation as being available to you guys. So make sure that you check every corner of the panel to find the slides. If not, just drop me an email and I'll make sure that I provide you the slides. Okay. So that I will have to ensure independently. All right, so we have questions about what is the best speaker configuration to make the best results out of ART. I don't think there is an answer to that, because what we have experienced is that ART really does a good job to any room we've seen. Now, what I can say is that you can start to go into better overall bass response of your speakers. Or let me rephrase. If you have speakers that can go low in frequency, it is nice to see and to leave the system and the ART to use them as low as they can, because it really helps to maintain the bass accuracy, especially when you listen to audio content, like in stereo reproduction, for example. It's very important and to keep the left bass on the bass side as much as you can. So by having your main speaker going low and using the other speakers to support it, you will maintain the directionality of this bass, and that's quite interesting. And this is very nice to maybe start thinking that LCR at least could be interesting to have them wider bandwidth than it was done so far. Now, you can always, in a system where you have traditional small speakers, ART will do, in any case, will improve your existing sound reproduction. I guarantee you 100% that any room that was calibrated, you put ART, it will be improved. Of course, if you've done a calibration manually, you measured everything, you have a proper passive treatment, including in the bass, well, don't change anything. You've done the work. ART will not do better than that. But in rooms that are more traditional, I would say it's going to really do a lot. And especially, it's really work hard in aligning all the timing of all your speakers. And that really tighten up all the sound reproduction. All right, more questions. We're very close to the end, so that's great. Okay, question about which walls to focus regarding the bass reproduction. Here there is no rules. It's just a matter of how many subs do you have, where are they located, and based on that, you can decide that, okay, the front wall is really where I can get the best out of it. Let's try to do something with that, and use the different tricks I just gave you, and see where it goes. Question about customers having more subwoofers on the sides. Yes, the answer is definitely. If you have more subwoofer on the sides, you can try doing this directional base management and see how it helps. Clearly, it can be a very interesting one. Last questions. Yeah, it's similar to that. What we experienced is that if you have two front subwoofers, LCR speakers capable, you can already have a very well controlled control base. Especially if you use also your other speakers to play at least between 70 Hz to 150 Hz, you will have a good control. But if you can add more subwoofers to them, to hits, that can really bring an even better control. And then last question is about, do we have to invert the subwoofer in the back? No, I mean, as I mentioned, it's not doing physically, you're not doing a dual base array, but the way the system works as a support, it compensates for the reflection. So if you have subwoofers in the back wall, subwoofer in the front wall, in a way, Dirac ART will work on the phase so that it removes the reflection. So in that way, do nothing on the phase, let the system do it. And that was the last question of the webinar, and we are right on time. So I think I did answer all the questions. I think the presentation was clear to you. You will have an email following up with the link to the video, and we will also, if you did not have it, drop me an email and I will provide you the slides. We are, of course, looking for any questions through the ticketing systems. You can always ask questions there and we will make sure we answer them. Thank you very much for participating for this new webinar. We wish you the best with using it. As I mentioned, it's different. It brings more parameters, so be more careful than in the past in using it. But if you understand what I described, you can now try different things and experiment that. Of course, and this is very important, don't hesitate to provide feedback to us. This is always useful. And that can help others to make the best out of their system. So thank you very much for your time. We will meet at different shows. Drop us questions. And for now, have a good day, have a good night, and talk to you soon. Thank you.